Sonic Superstars has only been out for just over a month, but speedrunners have wasted no time breaking everything possible with one goal in mind: beat the game in under an hour. And within a month of the game's release, they've done it. In this video, we're going to be going over the tricks, skips, and tech that made it all possible. Massive shout out to Tsukimos, the current world record holder of Sonic Superstars main story. At the time of recording this video, the record is 40:18 in loadless time. But how did this run get so fast within weeks of release? Glitch Hunter's MTP and Cryptic Jackknife are the two who are to thank for the majority of the glitches in the game. The very first thing that speedrunners do to save time starts before the run even begins: character selection. In Sonic Superstars, there has been quite a debate on which character you want to play with for the speedrun. Originally, speedrunners chose Sonic because, well, he's Sonic. His drop dash seemed too good to ignore because of how many times you would need to jump around obstacles, and the ability to get up to speed instantly seemed too good. After it all though, they have landed on Tails. His flight ability, which can also maintain speed pretty well in Superstars, is just unmatched. Tails also allows some tech that is only possible with his flight, but we'll talk about that later. The first trick we'll see in the run happens only about 10 seconds into the first stage. Sonic Superstars' main gimmick is its Emerald Power mechanic. These powers allow you to gain combat, movement, and extra abilities. Luckily for speedrunners, two of the best powers are right away. These powers are Avatar and, more importantly, Bullet. Now you can only get an Emerald Power once per zone, so speedrunners will try to blitz Emerald portals in the first two zones. Like I mentioned, it only takes about 10 seconds to get to the first one. The speedrun tech here is that you can pause just when you're about to collect the Emerald. If you restart the stage and then unpause, you will actually collect the Emerald and return to the normal stage. This skips two things, which are the lengthy results screen and the quick tutorial showcasing the Emerald's ability. While you do return to the very beginning of the stage, it still saves a substantial amount of time and is very easy to pull off. For the rest of Bridge Island Zone, there isn't anything else super crazy that speedrunners do, but Tsukimos does show off how good Avatar can be in the Act 2 boss fight. If you're enjoying the video so far, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Speed Jungle Zone opens with runners making a mad dash to the Emerald portal because this one gives us the best Emerald power in the game: Bullet. Bullet allows runners to do some crazy stuff. After doing the Emerald tutorial skip, we see Tsukimos instantly use Bullet in the stage to have an even better movement option than Tails' own flight. But even bigger than just a good movement option, Bullet allows for boss skips. Bosses in Superstars are some of the longest in the series, and that's because after most bosses get hit, they go invulnerable for an extended period of time. Speedrunners immediately identified that this would be a huge source of time loss, so they decided to skip every boss. As Tsukimos approaches the boss arena, he activates a flight with Tails. If you hit nearly any corner with Tails just right, he can actually clip out of bounds. And out of bounds is where the magic happens. Because Tails is already in a flight state, it's going to be a bit difficult for him to really go anywhere out of bounds, and this is where Bullet comes in. After a quick bullet use, you can skirt the boss arena, avoiding ever starting it in the first place to the waiting goal sign. Sky Temple is a long stage if played casually. It's a very vertical stage that has you snaking around it until you reach the top, then fight a boss. Obviously, speedrunners skip all of this. By lining up where this wheel meets the wall collision, you can bullet into this space and it will push you out of bounds. By continually spamming Bullet up, you can make it all the way to what is the final section of the stage in just one use of Bullet. Luckily for us, we land right next to a checkpoint, which will refresh our Emerald powers, and we can activate it immediately to make it all the way to the boss fight. This boss fight is one of the only fights that we can actually skip during the fight itself. This was originally found by MTP using Tails and just flying as high as possible. This actually allowed Tails to clip out of bounds just from a regular flight. Since Bullet is faster, we use that instead here, but it truly is that simple to skip this boss while he still attacks in the background. Pinball Carnival Act 1 immediately sees a use of Bullet to skip large amounts of platforming in an instant. This stage is really big on slopes. Tsukimos uses this to his advantage and wherever possible utilizes a slope jump into a single flight. This will maintain the speed of the slope jump for as long as possible. At the final section, where you would usually ride these slopes over and over, you can actually jump to skip to a later path since you pass it almost immediately. But here is where the stage gets really interesting. Instead of continuing on the regular path, you can actually clip out of bounds much farther below the boss arena and go below it. After a treacherous journey over the void, you can just make it to the end of the stage. Lagoon City is an underwater stage. Don't we all love those? While the stage handles the underwater sections well, they are still slow. While most of the sections are normally unavoidable, speedrunners find a way. With the combination of clever routing and bullet, speedrunners are able to skip all underwater sections in Act 1. Next is the Amy stage in Lagoon City. Speedrunners use her hammer to their advantage to blitz through every obstacle in the way, except for this guy. And that brings us to the area where Amy meets and saves Trip. So far in the main story speedrun, we have not found a way to skip this part, but we do know it's possible. By clipping out before the section where Amy actually meets Trip, you can completely get around the section. The problem is, we don't have the emerald powers that would be required for this skip yet, so we play it like normal for now. Lagoon City Act 2 has a massive skip where you not only skip a good chunk of the stage, but one of the longest bosses in the game as well. By flying out as far as you can and activating a bullet, you can make it all the way to the other side of the lengthy arena. Just make sure not to hit the snake. Sand Sanctuary is a wide and open stage at the start, which makes it a playground for the bullet ability. Speedrunners try to stay on the top paths and skip troublesome obstacles with both the combination of Tails' flight and bullet. After blazing through the stage, speedrunners have to once again skip the boss. Here there are a few ways to do it. Using Bullet's motion to clip out of bounds, or using the snake here seems to be the fastest way. By sliding on the snake just right where it connects with the ground, it can bounce you out of bounds, letting Tails bullet his way to the end of the stage. Press Factory Act 1 sees one of the most difficult clip outs in the game. You have to clip out, then just barely navigate to the correct little sliver of collision out of bounds without clipping back in. If all of this is done correctly, you still have to navigate out of bounds to just narrowly make it to the end of the stage, with less than a bullet to spare too. I'm sure at this point you've noticed the pattern. Clip out, bullet, skip the boss. These strats are just so broken and universal that they ended up being the best way to play the game fast. So, Golden Capital Act 1 is more of the same. Act 2, however, has some really interesting auto-scroller skips. By skipping the trigger for the first auto-scroller, runners are able to spin dash and keep that speed throughout the entire thing. The same skip can actually be done in the next auto-scroller section, but to much greater effect. The next auto-scroller actually contains the Fang boss fight and is one of the longest bosses in the game. Using a similar strat where you miss the trigger and land on the ground, you can zoom onto the platform and stay out of the auto-scroller entirely. This allows Tails to navigate out of bounds and skip the entire thing. After flying out of bounds, it's just holding up to victory. Cyber Station is one of the most broken stages in the run. There is some Tails-specific tech, new tech in the squid section of the stage, and a way to skip the boss, which was one of the hardest to find. One of the reasons this stage is so broken is that when Tails turns from normal form to Cyber, for some reason during this time, for just a moment, he is able to clip out of bounds. This allows for speedrunners to do basically whatever they want and go to sections they were never intended to. This also works in reverse, and one way to activate this is using an emerald power. For some reason, you switch back to normal Tails when using emerald powers, even in sections you're meant to be Cyber. So, when the power ends, you can basically just clip out of bounds since it transforms Tails. You do, however, briefly land in the squid section before clipping onto a ceiling above the stage. And lucky for us, we can ride this for a long time until we bullet to the end, skipping the boss. Frozen Base is a very different type of zone. One interesting decision is you can choose the Tails Act, and it actually lets you progress to Act 2, skipping Act 1. This is good because Tails can skip basically the entire stage. After playing through the initial parts of the stage, you can clip out and navigate all the way to the end in one bullet. Frozen Base Act 2 is also weird, since it's quite literally another gameplay style. This stage involves shooting down 10 different flying ships, and runners basically just loop around to get the ships on the other side until they're all taken down. After this, you face some bosses, and on the second boss, you can basically just damage boost over and over to destroy some massive balls. Egg Fortress is the last zone in the game, and it's also one of the most trick-heavy zones, and right away we have one of the first tricks. When you destroy this platform here, you can spin dash into one of the seams as it falls and allow Tails to clip out of bounds. With proper routing and bullet, you can skip a massive amount of the stage. After another clip out, you're able to navigate to the end of the stage, skipping all of the auto-scrolling, zero gravity, and platforming sections. But now, it's time to do it all in reverse. This time, less skips are definitely possible during the stage. One skip we didn't get to see in Act 1 was the teleport in the zero gravity section. For some reason, the mix of weird physics and weird collision allows for Tails to teleport. While hitting this seam here and doing the dash input, you will teleport farther along in the stage. As for why this works, I have no clue at all. Now, as we approach the final boss, you may have been wondering if this one was skippable too. While we've been able to skip a ton of bosses so far in the game, this stage doesn't end with a capsule or a goal sign like usual. It ends by beating the boss and plays a cutscene. but none of that matters because they left a capsule out of bounds. Why? I have no clue whatsoever. I can't even fathom a reason for why this is placed here in a super random location, but it is. And the craziest part is that it still works. Speedrunners will go and do a normal clip out earlier in the stage and carefully navigate out of bounds to avoid clipping back in, while also avoiding the top kill plane, since dying is bad. Once you see this timer, you know you're in the correct location, and if you drop down right on this seam, you will land straight on the capsule. One side effect of this skip though is that sometimes the game can just crash. Talk about an anticlimactic ending. And that is Sonic Superstars done in 4018. Once again, massive shoutouts to Sukimos. They're an incredibly talented Sonic speedrunner worth following. Sonic Superstars speedruns have developed so much in a short amount of time, and I'm incredibly excited to see where they go. For more Sonic speedrunning content, make sure to subscribe, and thanks for watching!